What's up, y'all? I am back. Today I am gonna review the X-Men. Like I said, originally I was gonna do it Friday, but then I had to roast Expendables, and I just decided I was gonna do it yesterday, but I decided just to chill out on Saturday. So I'm gonna do two videos, doing this one, and then later this evening, I am gonna be roasting that shitty new Spy Kids. But the first X-Men movie, I remember what this came out. I was 4 because it was 2000 when it came out. I do remember the lead up to it surprisingly, and I even had a fly. I even remember having like a couple toys. I had like Wolverine. I had a couple Wolverines. So there was one where he's on the bike and he's like in his like kind of leather jacket, and then I had one where he's in his costume. But yeah, it was. This movie was a big deal because yeah, you had Blade. I do think Blade did open the door. I'm not going to say that, but I do think in terms of mainstream, everyone knew who the X-Men were because Blade. You got to remember, Blade came out after like Batman and Robin, and that nearly tanked comic book movies at the time. So Blade, they really did not market it as a. You go watch those old trailers. It was more like, oh, this is another Wesley Snipes vehicle movie, and that's more what they marketed as. But this what everyone knew, and the fact that this delivered, and it really was not a 1-to-1, but they pretty much caught the tone of the X-Men perfectly. There's the little changes I would make, but overall, I think they really captured the essence of the X-Men. I mean, especially the way the whole mutant. I love how that is entrenched in that world. Um, I love Hugh Jackman as Wolverine is like that is. I know everyone talks about Hugh Jackman, but we got to talk about Patrick Stewart as Professor X. That he was Professor X straight out of the comics. The way he carried himself, the way he played that character, delivered the lines like just in just in this one. Same with Ian McKellen as Magneto. Like he was so great as Gandalf, but I love him as Magneto. That's probably my favorite role of his, because Magneto's like my favorite villain in general in Marvel. He might be my overall favorite villain. I know everyone loves Doctor Doom, love Doctor Doom too, but it's Magneto for me. I love his whole story, and Ian McKellen really captured. I like Michael Fassbender too, and I think James McAvoy also caught like those characters perfectly. So, but in my opinion, overall, it's still these two for me. They're because Magneto and Professor X have always kind of had, yeah, even when they were opposing each other, they always kind of had that respect and still kind of friendship for each other. There are times they would visit each other just to play fucking chess, you know? And I think they really caught that perfectly on screen. But, Hugh Jackman's entrance as Wolverine was perfect. I know everyone doesn't like his height. Some people don't like the height. But he really was Wolverine. The bar fight scene, um, the way he would just say pal and just certain lines. Even when he said bub the first time. And the thumbnail of this video is one of my favorite scenes in the movie when Wolverine goes to like a metal detector and it goes off and Cyclops is laughing at him and Wolverine does the middle finger with his claw. Fucking love that scene. Like the humor is genuinely well done in this movie compared to like obviously the MCU humor that gets fucking overdone nowadays. So I think they perfectly. Like I said, there's a few negatives. Like the costumes do not hold up. I'm sorry. The whole leather thing. This was '90s. They thought, there's still left over from the '90s, and maybe they thought the whole bright colors from the cartoon would have been too much, but they could have been a medium. Because it's just like then you look at a couple years later with Spider-Man, that first Raimi, and you look at that Spider-Man suit. It's like maybe they should have did a more actual comic booky comic costume, just because when you look at that to this day, that Raimi suit is still seen as one of the greatest Spider-Man suits ever, like even with comic suits. So it's like maybe they should have just did that with this, because the costumes in these do not hold up. The whole leather thing, yeah, I didn't mind it when I was younger, and the movie still it's not like the costumes ruined the movie or anything. I still love that final act at the Statue of Liberty. I love the fights. I think Tyler Maine's a decent Sabretooth, even though I just wish we got a little bit more of him. And he should not have died. I think they should not have written him off the movie. he should have survived and be saved for the second one, especially if you know like that one heads more towards Wolverine's backstory. We learn more, like Stryker. It would have been good to have Sabretooth in that, but I think everything else is good. So I can overlook the costumes not really holding up. It was the time. I get it. Maybe they thought if they, especially you gotta remember too, this is still only 3 years or so after Batman and Robin, and maybe in their minds we're like, okay, we can't go overly yellow and comic. And it's ironic because a lot of people want that now, but I think it was just at that time because Batman and Robin, those suits were very kind of like out there, so maybe they were just we don't want to do that, so we just went with the black. I get it; it doesn't ruin the movie or anything. But basically, the Written Registration Act is about to become enacted, and basically they have to. It's more about finding Rogue and Wolverine because they're on their own, and Wolverine's entrance is perfect. Oh, my other negative is Rogue. It's not Anna Paquin, and it's not. I think she could have played a good Rogue if they actually had her be actual Rogue. I didn't like the whole fucking angsty um, Rogue. That's not her character. I would have rather her been the sassy Southern Belle because that's her actual character. The whole goth, the pseudo. I don't even want to say goth, like angsty, the teenage Rogue didn't work for me. But Magneto actually needed her. The whole time, Professor X thought Magneto wanted Wolverine because of his regenerative abilities and his healing factor. But no, it was actually Rogue. And Miss Rebecca Romaine was so good as Mystique. So I think that's the one thing this movie was perfectly cast. Like almost everybody was really, even Senator Kelly was a good, like, I wouldn't say antagonist, but kind of a little bit antagonistic towards mutants until he becomes one, and then he has to go to the X-Men for help later on. Though that scene when he dies, as a kid fucked with me because he like got all big and then he just popped and he's just like a bunch of water. That I don't know, that tripped me out as a kid. I love the look of and then the moment everyone suits up is great, obviously. And then they go to this Statue of Liberty. We have some cool fights. Rogue versus Wolverine versus Mystique was pretty good. I always love that fight. That scene where she transforms from him back to herself when she does that kick holds up. Like the effects hold up largely. So the X Jet scenes, I'll admit, that's probably the only effect that didn't really hold up that much, but it's still an iconic scene. Ian McKellen. I was also gonna consider making this a thumbnail too. Was when Magneto has the gun, like he takes all the cops' guns and like flips it on them. Just that imagery, it's like that is the power. They really capture the power of Magneto. Like Magneto is really powerful. Like, so yeah, I love that scene, man. I just this movie, came out at the right time. It was kind of what CBMS needed because then, yeah, well, no, obviously a couple years later we got the Sam Raimi Spider-Man, and I think if this hadn't come out, I don't know if we would have gotten that Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie because this how successful it was and well received. Like I said, there's little things like not a fan of Rogue portrayal, but they also continue it in the next movie too. Not as bad though. I think at least in the next one they try to have her. There's moments where she tries to be a little bit like Rogue. It isn't just the angsty one, and then she's gone in the third one. And then like I said, the costume. But overall, it's still a great movie. I'd probably give this a 9.5 out of 10. 9 out of 10 because I actually think I like 2 a little bit better. But I do love this movie. Just simple. Brotherhood of Evil Mutants versus the X-Men, simple plot, good villains. So yeah, later tonight I'm gonna be roasting that new Spy Kids. I don't even know why they made that. That was because you already had a bunch of several bad Spy Kids. You had that bad third one, and then you had that awful fourth one with Jessica Alba. So it's like, why even try to make another one? And reboot? Who asked for a reboot of Spy Kids? And it was everything about it was bad. The CGI, the characters. I was just watching the whole. Why am I here? Why does this even exist? Why do you? It's like Hollywood, like this obsession with just rebooting everything, and it's like when you go to the bottom of the barrel to reboot fucking Spy Kids, like, are you kidding me? Yeah. Anyway, so I'll talk about that later, but let's talk. I'm happy to at least talk about something I like because this weekend there's just been a lot of shit. I mean, obviously Expendables, but even the Continental that was disappointing. Like I talked about the other day, it's just so it's at least nice to talk about something I like. So the movie opens up. We see Magneto as a kid, in the in the concentration camp, and this is where we see him use his powers for the first time, and then we find out about mutants. I love that scene between Senator Kelly and Jean Grey, who I thought Famke Jensen. I don't know if I'm saying her name right, but I thought she was pretty good as Jean. Which, like, there's little things in some of these action movies I wish they would have changed, obviously, but I think she was pretty good. So this is where we first see Professor X. After the speech, Professor X sees Eric watching the speech, and then he leaves, and basically this is where we get like that first scene. It was so good, man. The chemistry between Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart is just they got the perfect actors for these roles, man. Like it really because like in the comics, Professor X and Magneto have always, even when they're at kind of obviously they've always been kind of adverse, opposed to each other because they have different views. Like Magneto's more, I want to kill humanity because he's in his mind he's protecting mutants, but he also does think he's also in a lot of versions thinks they're superior. And Professor X has like the we could coexist, and it's like, but they've always had that respect for each other. So I've always like even Magneto's like stay out of my way, like because he doesn't want to potentially get in war with Charles. So this is where we see young Rogue kiss her boyfriend, and this is where we find out she's a mutant. She flees to Canada, and this is where we first meet Wolverine. And I really do like this opening fight scene, and I love the little metal sounds when he beats up that dude, like he headbutt, like. But that scene though, when he punches the dude in his hand, that does fuck with me a little bit. It's like, ow, dude, because Wolverine's adamantium. So then he gets his money, chills at the bar. The dude he fought like tried to start some shit because he figured out he's a mutant. And then Wolverine pulls out the claws, and the claw effects look pretty good. Like they hold up. So it's kind of sad, like how that looks good, and then we get to like X-Men Origins Wolverine, and the claws look like awful. And that's like, keep in mind that came out 9 years later. But so yeah, Wolverine leaves. Rogue stows away on his truck. Initially, Wolverine, I'm just gonna call him Wolverine or Logan, tells her to go. He basically drops her off and leaves her, but then he decides to take her with him. And this is where they end up crashing. They run into like a tree, like a toppled tree. We see Sabretooth for the first time, and I actually do prefer this look. Though I think Lee Schreiber from Origins played a way better Sabretooth because he actually got to showcase the character. Because in the one in this movie, all he really does is roar, and he has like a couple of lines, but he really just roars. Though, in terms of physicality, they got the right eye. They got Tyler Mane. You might also recognize he's the actor who played Michael in the Halloween Rob Zombie movies. And they got him because he's a big motherfucker. Like in real life, he's a big dude. Like even when he was Michael Myers, he's huge. So I kind of get why they got him for this is Sabretooth. And I like the look, the long hair. He has like because he looks like an animal. Sabretooth, I just wish they dipped more into his rivalry with Logan because they don't really explore that. Like though he clearly has some kind of like he wants to get Wolverine because he even grabs like later on in a scene after talking to Magneto. he takes Wolverine's dog tag. So it's like they kind of did it. I just wish they went more into it because Sabretooth and Wolverine have a long history. And that's also why I'm a little irked that they killed him in this one. Because it's like he should have been in the second movie. But whatever. That's neither here or there. I think it happened. But I think he played the role well, and I like this little fight. But then the X-Men show up, Cyclops and Storm. Who Halle Berry is Storm. I'll admit, there are times she's not great. I think she's better in the second movie, though. I think it's just some moments in this movie, like that line about, you know what happens when Toad gets hit by lightning or something, and she's like, same thing that happens to everybody. It's like, oh my god, that wasn't good. But she's all right. I think I can see arguments they should have probably got someone else. I've seen some people even say like Angela Bassett should have probably been Storm, and I can see that. But I think she was fine. She definitely gets better in my opinion in the second film. It's just this one she's not really. She has some, hit or miss points, but James Marsden as Cyclops is great. I wish I'll admit, I was never the biggest Cyclops, and I was always more Wolverine. So as a kid, I was always okay with these movies being Wolverine centric, but now I kind of understand that criticism a little bit that these movies are too. And this one, not necessarily. I do feel like Cyclops at least got to be Cyclops in this. He got to showcase his stuff. And he even got to showcase a little bit of his leadership. So, but it was like the sequels and on. They never really, even in third movie, he dies early on. Like, these movies were always more Wolverine geared, and it's a little disappointing because Cyclops is the actual leader of the X-Men. He's like one of the OG members, and I do think he deserved a little bit better. And James Marsden's a good actor, actually. I thought he was pretty. In this one, he's actually really good. It's just the second one, he doesn't really, and as much as I love that movie, he doesn't really do much in that. So he has like a couple of scenes where he has like kind of moment being Cyclops, but only really in this one is where he actually let him be Cyclops. So they save him. Wolverine wakes up, thinks like he's in some kind of facility. Then Professor X is leading him with his voice, and this is where he runs into Professor X, and he finds out about the school, and he asks Logan to stay. If Logan stays, that he'll look into like his past, because he doesn't remember his past really. And then this is where we get little like in dream scenes, like bits of him being in the tank that's getting him the adamantium. I do love Hugh Jackman. It made sense why they went with him. He had that bravado of Wolverine. Like, even like he obviously gets more yoked throughout the sequels, but he caught that like he was such a perfect casting, man. Like, I know everyone says Robert Downey Jr., but for me, it's Robert. If I'm going like overall best CBM casting, it has to be Hugh Jackman. I think it's tied between him though and Rorschach from Jackie Earle Haley as Rorschach, because that was a legendary performance too. But anyway, he was Wolverine. Yeah, maybe he's not as short, whatever, who cares? It's fine. It doesn't necessarily, like, I don't necessarily think Wolverine being short is like they got everything else down. They got the loner aspect down. Even like initially, like Wolverine was always kind of hesitant to join the X-Men. Not like he was like hate humans, but he also like, I don't necessarily care about saving him either kind of deal. So I think they really caught that aspect down. While this is happening, we all see, Iceman. Granted, he's not Iceman yet; he's just Bobby. Because he's more in the background. In the second film is where he kind of comes in, and they have him do more. So while this is happening, this is Professor X thinks Magneto wants Wolverine for his abilities, but it's actually he wants Rogue. He just doesn't know it. And I really love the scene where Professor X was going through the school. Like, they really caught that essence of what made the X-Men the X-Men. So Senator Kelly gets abducted. And I love that slow turn because Senator Kelly just going off about mutants, and you could tell Rogue's just getting more and more angry. And then she switches, and then knocks him out. They bring him to their base, And I love just even in this scene, just Ian McKellen, just he captures Magneto perfectly. Like, when you're talking about mutants being dangerous, you're talking about me, because like ultimately it is kind of that. So Kelly manages to escape, but they end up giving him this radiation, which pretty much turns him into a mutant. So when Kelly escapes, there's that scene where he gets out of the water. I fucking love it. Um, but unfortunately, during the night, because yeah, this is where Wolverine has the nightmare, and he accidentally stabs Rogue, and then she ends up taking his powers a little bit, and that's when she heals herself, but Wolverine gets kind of taken out for a second. Then Mystique manages to basically get into school, poses as Bobby, and tells her like everyone's mad at her, so basically get her to run away. And then she goes to Cerebro to locate her for Magneto, and the team notices she's missing. Logan initially wants to go off on his own, but he doesn't want to. But Wolverine, sneaks off on Cyclops' bike, and I'm just gonna say Wolverine on a motorcycle. Just that's perfect imagery. Um, he manages to talk to Rogue and kind of try to get her to come back, but then Magneto shows up, freezes Wolverine, because he's metal, so he basically could just keep him in place. He takes her while Cyclops and Storm fight Toad and Sabretooth, and, cause a scene. And this is where we get that iconic scene where Magneto just, because a cop show up and he tries to walk out, and then he freezes, he grabs all the guns and then basically is about to kill them all. And that's when Professor X basically takes control of Sabretooth. But we find out that Professor X can't get into Magneto's mind because of the helmet. So then, and then basically find out what the machine is about. So then they have to go, the Brotherhood managed to leave, take Rogue to their base and set up their plan. And so the Cerebro gets fixed because Professor X, ends up getting injured while trying to initially use it. They take her to Ellis Island, and this is where we get probably the big moment where Wolverine finally suits up. And I do love this sequence, man. It's just the teamwork is there. I love the scene every time he walks up through, like, because there's like a metal detector and it goes off, and Cyclops kind of laughing at Wolverine, and Wolverine just flips him off with the claw. It's great. So yeah, we get a fight. Toad ends up fighting the others while Wolverine fights Mystique, posed as him. And I actually really loved that little fight between those two. It was very well done, because as a kid, I was like, Wolverine, get this bitch. I was like, yeah, it was that scene where she transforms, like when she's about to kick him, was fucking, the effects to hold up for that scene. And Toad, I'm gonna be honest, I never really cared for him, even in the comics. I'm like, you're just a dude who can. Reptile from Mortal Kombat's better. Like, it's kind of like that kind of thing. Because he has like, sorry about that, he has like Toad powers, and yeah. And then yeah, Storm manages to take him out, and that's where we get that really cringe line. Because it's like, it was supposed to be like almost a setup for a joke, and then there just wasn't a joke. It was the same thing that happens to everything else. I'm like, what? So Magneto activates the machine, and he ends up capturing a lot of the X-Men. Wolverine breaks out. We have a fight between Wolverine and Sabretooth on kind of like on top of the statue, which was pretty well done. Wolverine then frees the other team. Cyclops manages to take out Sabretooth, and that's where I'm like, they should have just kept him alive. Like, Wolverine then goes into the machine because he's like the only one who can withstand like the radiation or something like that, and manages to distract him long enough to Cyclops to take it out. Um, but Rogue is, basically nearly dead because of all the powers that have been used. So he kind of transfers some of his powers to her. Um, Magneto gets arrested. Wolverine and Logan wake up. Wolverine and Professor X wake up. Wolverine decides he's going to go off and try to learn what happened to him. Because Professor X, Xavier, gives him a lead. So basically, he decides to go on his own. He has a nice little moment with Rogue, who I just wish they made her like the character in the comics. I think if they did that more in the second one, maybe it wouldn't have been so bad. But it's just when even in the second one, like I think because I rewatched the second one like a couple of months ago, and I was like, I wish they did her a bit better. Anna Paquin's a good actress. I just don't think they even in like for the couple episodes I watched of True Blood, even though I didn't really like the show, she felt more like Rogue in that somewhat. It was like I kind of wish they let her be Rogue in those movies. That's my only criticism of this movie. My real criticism, like the suits, costumes thing, like that's not like that doesn't really ruin. That doesn't like bring the movie down or anything. That's just more like I kind of wish they just went with a more comic books accurate. Just because when you see, mentioned earlier, like when you see Spider-Man suit from the Raimi films and how everyone still to this day looks at that is great. So Magneto and Professor X have like a final scene together, which I like, and he basically says, "I'm gonna break out one day," and then that he'll be there. I love that. I love how the film ended with them. It made sense ending it with them. They always have that friendship, even when they oppose each other. There's that respect a little bit. So I can't wait. It made me definitely hyped for the second one, and X2 was so delivered. So those first two X-Men movies, man, were so. This one especially, I think this one was just a simple film that captured the essence of the X-Men. Yeah, there's little things here and there that like I have little issues with, but I love the movie. So can't wait to talk about X2 on. I'll for sure do it Friday. I shouldn't be reviewing anything. I'm gonna probably see Saw X, but I don't think I'm gonna review it. So anyway, I'm gonna call it here, guys. I'm gonna do a video later tonight. I'm gonna roast that shitty new Spy Kids movie, but yeah. All right, y'all. Talk to y'all later. Later tonight.